It is 7:00 p.m. on Monday, January 6th, 2020, and I call to order this meeting of the Richfield School Board, which will begin with the annual organizational meeting. In attendance this evening are board members Paula Cole, Peter Tensing, Allegra Smishek, Christine Malik, Tim Paulus, and I am Crystal Brackey. Superintendent Stephen Yanowski and student board member Naomi Ferguson join us at the table. So we begin this first meeting of the year with the swearing in of any new board members and selecting board officers for the coming year. So I am excited to begin this evening by administering the oath of office to Allegra Smishek. Allegra, would you like to stand or remain seated? Your call.
Let's stand.
Okay, let's do it. So, Allegra, please repeat after me and tell me if you need smaller chunks. I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and this state.
I affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and this state.
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office.
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office.
Of school board member of Independent School District number 280.
Of school board member of Independent School District number 280.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
To the best of my judgment and ability.
Welcome, Director Smishek. Okay, we move next to the election of school board officers, and we'll begin with the selection of the board chair. Are there any nominations for the role of board chair?
I would nominate Crystal Brackey as board chair if she is willing to continue.
Thank you, Christine. I am willing to continue for one more year.
I'll second that nomination.
Thank you. Are there any additional nominations? And as is tradition, we call for nominations 3 times. So one more time, one last call for nominations. Everybody's looking at each other. So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Cole. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll also vote aye, and we'll continue in the chair position for 2020. So we will move on to nominations for the role of board vice chair.
I nominate Tim Paulus.
I will second the nomination.
Okay, so we have a nomination and a second. Are there any additional nominations? One last call. So we have a motion by Ms. Cole and a second by Mr. Tensing. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The vice chair position, chair votes aye. I'm so sorry. We didn't even ask if you would do it.
I'm used to that. I said in December I would do it.
Okay. Still felt right just to.
I appreciate it.
The chair votes aye, and the vice chair position will be filled by Tim Paulus in 2020. Next, we move on to the role of board clerk. Are there any nominations for that position?
Madam Chair, I will nominate Christine Malik for the position of board clerk.
I will second.
Christine, are you
I
willing
would
to
be
serve?
willing to do that, yes.
Fantastic. Are there any additional nominations? One last call. Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Mr. Paulus. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the clerk position will be filled by Christine Malik in 2020. And last but not least, are there any nominations for the role of board treasurer?
I will nominate Paula Cole to be treasurer.
I will second.
Any additional nominations? One last call. Paula, are you willing to continue as treasurer this year?
Sure, it's hard work, but I'm willing to do it.
You signed things
We
really well.
appreciate it.
I sign things really well.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Malik. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the treasurer position will be filled by Paula Cole in 2020. Okay, we will have additional board business later in the agenda in the new business section. for things that we may or may not finalize this evening related to board member compensation and liaison assignments. And we'll now transition into the beginning of our regular business meeting. There are printed copies of the agenda on the table near the door and also available on richfieldschools.org website. So our first item of business this evening is to approve the agenda before us. One note in advance, just to give people a heads up, I will likely be calling for a brief recess about an hour in so that we have time for a little bit of a body break this evening. I will aim to do that at a natural pause in the agenda, but don't be surprised if and when we get to that point in the agenda. Is anyone prepared to move the agenda as presented?
I will move the agenda as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Cole. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the agenda is approved. So we move into the information and proposals non-action items section of the agenda. This evening containing 3 items in the superintendent's update, including our annual presentation from Richfield Middle School. Just want to note that the next opportunity for public comment will be at our board meeting on Tuesday, January 21st. So with that, I will turn things over to Superintendent Yanowski.
All right, so excited to begin our organizational meeting where we will have to obviously get a new nameplate for Ms. Christine Malik as treasurer. So making sure that we
Clerk.
get that. That's right, clerk. It'll continue the confusion of getting the wrong nameplate for people. Sorry about that, Ms. Christine the clerk. With that, I'm excited to bring our annual presentation of our middle school. We are joined today by Assistant Principals Ryan Finke and Steve Lucas and Teacher Educator Extraordinaire Julie Magnuson. So we are excited to have them join us to talk about some of the exciting things happening in college and career readiness at Richfield Middle School. Mr. Finke.
Thank you, Dr. Yanowski. Thank you, board. Wanted to start off this evening just again to thank you for having us to come share what we have been working on over the last really year and a half. About a year and a half ago, under the guidance of Dr. Carlandria Hines, as she took over as principal of Richfield Middle School, along with Steve Lucas and myself, we began looking at our strategic plan again under her leadership to see what were the areas of strength and what were the areas that we could potentially look to improve upon at the middle school. One of such area was around our strategy 1, looking at providing that challenging, relevant, and engaging educational opportunity, specifically looking at how to support college and career pathways for our high school students. When we looked at what that does and what we are currently offering 9 through 12, we really wanted to determine ways in which we could support it at the 6-8 level as well. So when we look at increasing exposure to college and career opportunities, the college and career guidance for students and families, and ultimately providing more experience for our students so they were able to make those decisions as soon as possible and helping provide them with the resources in order to make those decisions 9 through 12. One of the pieces that we started about a year and a half ago is looking at the research. What do we need to do? Where should we be going? One quote came from David T. Connolly, who was the author of College and Career Ready, helping all students succeed beyond high school, and really laid out and focused our curriculum around 4 key areas: content knowledge, cognitive strategies, learning skills and techniques, and transition knowledge and skills. And the next slide, Mr. Flukas will talk a little bit about what that looks like through the eyes of a student.
So as assistant principal of middle school, it becomes very clear that we really have to delve into the thinking of 11 to 13-year-olds. Moving away from the general belief that things just happen the way they happen and moving into more concrete thinking. So when we look at the epistemology of being able to cite and define what you believe or what you think based on evidence, we have to start getting students the information about specifically why they think, what they think, and how you ground that in evidence. So specifically, we look with college and career readiness as how do I think, how do I know, how do I act, and how do I go? So basically, once I have this body of information that is other than guessing or hyperbole, how do I move forward? So that's how the concrete piece begins with the thinking. Moving past that, what we want to do is we want to avoid some thinking errors that kids make. But specifically, we know that when kids are not successful, it's not because they're not smart enough. It's because that they don't have experience in some of those soft skills that tend to get us in trouble sometimes. So what are we looking at generally in terms of social emotional learning, critical thinking skills, being able to self-regulate, being able to manage your time, right? There's a huge gap between being a freshman in college and being a senior in high school. No one's going to call you, or you're not going to get a message to say you're late for class. So how do we get kids to really understand the importance of that? And then specifically, the whole idea of cultural competency. Basing what's happening in the world compared to what we've been taught and how I use that information to navigate in the world.
So as I said at the very beginning, this whole process started about 1.5 years ago. In spring 2018, in collaboration with Dr. Daniels and the leadership team at the high school, we looked at the implementation of 3 new pathway courses aligned to RHS. We brought in a computer science pathway, an education pathway taught by Julie Magnuson, as well as an automotive design pathway. Moving into the fall of 2018 is where we began that review of the strategic plan. We identified our area of need for the CCR class, so we are in for short CCR, College and Career Readiness. Researched and identified those best practices, and then this past winter we looked at how we could restructure our schedule in order to be more aligned with the high school, but also allow for the implementation of a CCR course. And that's what brought us to an A and B schedule. Going into the spring and this summer, we looked at curriculum development, and that is where Julie Magnuson has been an integral part of the work that we have done, as far as not only developing the curriculum, providing those supports and resources, but also providing the training that our staff needed. One of the things that we were very cautious of is we wanted to make sure that this was not one more thing that we are throwing onto our teachers and say, go for it. We really, really wanted to make sure that we were providing our students with a quality curriculum, but also making sure that we were providing our staff with the support that they needed. We also looked at how to implement Naviance, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a minute, but that's also aligned with our 9 through 12. This summer, we provided staff training and support, and this fall, we started with our full implementation of our CCR curriculum. Approximately 85% of our students are enrolled in that CCR class, and the most essential components of the class are also embedded into our academic skills courses, our ALD courses, and the other classes for those students who do not have an opportunity for that CCR class. Really, when it comes down to the scheduling, we are focused on the prioritization for our students. In a perfect world, I would love to have 100% of our students be a part of it. It is really looking at prioritizing what are the needs of our students. We have many students who are in dual language. We have academic language development needs for our students. And I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about what we're going to be doing for next year to increase that number, to make sure we have as many students as possible having that opportunity. The last piece that we have done this past fall was continue to partner with Best Buy as well as Richfield Bloomington Honda to bring in guest speakers to talk to our students about opportunities, what that looks like, and how those different people in a professional capacity got to where they are today. Our curriculum is really focused on 2 core components. The first comes from Ramp Up to Readiness. Ramp Up to Readiness is the University of Minnesota's College and Career Readiness program, and it is grounded in equity and the importance of college for all. One piece that is really important and that we always tell our students is college is any type of post-secondary school where you can earn a certificate or a degree that leads to a career. So it's really focused not on us telling our students what they should be, but listening to our students and helping them provide the resources for what they want to be. And the second piece is around Naviance. Naviance is an online platform. It allows students to have an e-portfolio that will go with them not only starting in 6th grade, but moving forward into 7th, 8th, and ultimately into high school. Through this platform is really where the goals are created, clusters are created. I'll show some screenshots here in just a minute, but it's kind of that one-stop shop for our students. Probably one of the most powerful aspects of Naviance is it allows our students to really look in the future. What kind of careers do I want? What does that pay? What kind of schooling do I need? What are different avenues? When people think of education, they often think of teaching. There are hundreds of jobs in education that are not just around public school teaching.
So when we jump into the curriculum, we look at skills for success. So what are the rituals and routines? You know, in school, we're always talking about What are the rituals and teams? What do we want the kids to know and do on a consistent basis? We want students to be able to delve into their emails. We want students to be able to detect their grades. We want students to be able to balance a calendar and a syllabus. So if they know they have assignments coming up or tests coming up, that all can be covered in that one specific place. These are skills that are lifelong that kids will be needing forever, basically. So when we go into our next slide, this is what a specific lesson might look like. So in this lesson, we're talking about perseverance. So we always start with the definition. We will focus on perseverance, which is defined as continued effort in doing something despite difficulty, failure, or opposition. So what are the challenges that you're going to face? Next slide. So again, we're going to look at another definition, analyzing perseverance. Perseverance is doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. So we want to start talking to students about grit, okay? So even in middle school, it's okay for students to be challenged. It's okay for them to struggle a little bit. We don't want the first time for a student to really be challenged to be a sophomore in high school. We want kids to understand that it's okay to not know right now or not know yet, but we don't want them to give up. We want them to keep with the challenge. Here's some examples of what student work might look like when we look at what is your vision of what your life is going to look like. If you look at the top, the student Sophie has defined where she wants to live. She wants to go to Brown University. I know that's hard to see. She's talking about a career in terms of what she wants to do after she leaves college and what she kind of wants her life to look like. So again, to get kids to have kind of a visual map of what they believe their life could possibly look like. On to the next map. This lesson has to do with focus. So this young man on the left wants to be a football player or wants to be an athlete. So what are the things that he needs to know or he needs to start concentrating on and skill development right now for him to be successful when he goes to college? Clearly, he wants to go to school at NDSU, potentially as a baseball player. Again, all those things are important when we start looking at the future for our students.
One of the things Julie has done masterfully throughout the CCR curriculum is embed not only hands-on learning opportunities, but also through that Naviance platform, there are certain tasks that are assigned to the students. And so this is an actual screenshot taken from a student. And so you can see how the tasks are assigned. You'll see here are two examples of things that students have done. One of the first things that students did this fall was create academic goals for themselves. We've talked to students about what a SMART goal looks like, how to create goals. We've also started looking at cluster finders. What are your interests? What are the things that you enjoy doing right now? And how might that play into a potential career down the road? One of the pieces I talked a little bit earlier is just the power of the Naviance tool. When you look at a cluster results, if you were to click, when a student clicks on education, training, transportation, ag, food, and natural resources, each one of those clicks creates another whole list of a whole nother list of resources specific around those fields. So if you really want to start digging into, well, what does transportation, distribution, and logistics look like? If I'm 13, 14, I'll be honest, I'm much older than that, and I'm not 100% sure what goes around distribution and logistics. By clicking that tab, it takes me to a whole list of options and fields that I can explore further. So when it all comes together, it is the lessons, it is the different pieces that students can work on, and finally it's that Naviance platform where everything is housed and ultimately will serve as their e-portfolio when they leave Richfield Public Schools. When we look at our next steps for next year and moving forward, we need to make sure that we are expanding that curriculum, making sure that we are providing as many opportunities as possible for our students, looking at how we prioritize our schedule, looking at how we prioritize class placements for our students, working with our stakeholders, with our parents, with our students, with our staff, to determine best practices for that. We also are in the beginning stages of creating grade level committees. Right now, because this was our first year, all students 6, 7, and 8 are receiving that same baseline curriculum. Moving forward, we will have grade level committees. So 7th and 8th graders will have a different curriculum that will keep going and building upon what they started this year. Also looking at how we can continue to build our community partnerships. Best Buy is an amazing resource. Richfield Bloomington Honda was an amazing resource. How do we get our students actually into our community to see those professions firsthand and to see what possibilities they have in the world, but also in our community here as well. So with that, any questions? Open up for Mr. Tennyson.
Yes. So we're just starting with Naviance. This is our first year of experience with Naviance, correct?
At the middle school.
Got it. At the middle school.
Correct.
So, and tell me about as far as is the high school doing anything with Naviance right now, or what's the vision on that, and how do you see that particular tool kind of being part of operationally at the high school?
I actually have a meeting with high school counselors set up this week, and we're going to be tackling the alignment issues and how we're going to try to make that as seamless as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have the same package that the high school does, so we're kind of following their lead in the tools that we use. But the tasks that we are having our kids start with right now in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade will be part of their portfolio that will follow them up through whatever post-secondary options they choose. It's
So
a very
maybe-
powerful tool.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. And you know, one of the things that we hear or have heard from our students as part of the Reimagine process, and we've certainly heard this repeated, is the desire to see their experience, their educational experience, be something that the way students put it is they want learning for life, not necessarily learning for the sake of what you need academically on your transcript. And so the way I'm interpreting that to some extent is that students are asking to be able to see the connection between, say, taking algebra and whatever their own goals are. So Naviance seems like a platform that would really start to enable some of that stuff. And that's one of the pieces that I guess I've been personally interested in finding out from the high school, at least, is how we do a better job of, when we're getting into that scheduling process with our kids, of being proactive and being ahead of some of that, you know, kind of reactive, oh gosh, I've got 26 kids in this section, now I need to slide this student over into pottery, but they actually really have zero, you know what I mean? So I guess I find that exciting, and also recognize that there's some operational kind of logistical pieces that are part of that.
One of the powerful pieces has been around our work vertical, with our vertical alignment work 612.
Yeah.
Part of Julie's task around that has been around vertical alignment with the high school, so that we can continue to move forward and have those pieces in as well.
So do you have identified individuals who are essentially co-owning that sort of piece?
Yes, in fact, it's my understanding that the new hire counselor is a Naviance expert.
Wonderful.
So I'm looking to tap into our expertise in a few days as a novice to the program. So yes.
All right. And then it would be appropriate for us as board members to continue having that expectation of the high school, that we can start to see how Naviance as a tool is being effectively leveraged.
So as we work to do this alignment, it comes with the knowledge that there are a lot of schools that begin a 6-year plan in middle school that begins planning towards future after high school. The middle school has worked to do that alignment beginning with the high school now. They're implementing Naviance and ramp up to readiness in middle school, and that will just continue to grow up as part of a lot of what we have heard in those social studies presentations, but also aligning our work to what honestly is happening in a lot of schools from middle and high school that we're trying to catch up.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Thanks, Steve.
I have a question about the clusters. I'm curious to know if there's some sort of assessment for what they like, because I know as a teacher that you ask a kid, what do you want to do when you grow up, and it's gonna be something related to something they already know or what their parents are doing. So I'm curious to know how the clusters are selected.
Yep, the students took an individual diagnostic test, which they answered many, many questions about their own interests. And then they got individualized results on the clusters based on their individual answers. The kids were really surprised. It was neat to see them kind of start exploring it. And then many of them might have like one fixed idea, but when you open up those clusters, there's so many options. And then it goes into such detail. Kids were seeing specific colleges, career paths, careers in different states, even like income. So it really opened opportunities for the kids. Now they will be doing a third task coming up that will be a little more specific into actual careers within those clusters. So that's the next steps the kids are taking. But it was neat to see their options open up, and then they made connections with their classmates based on those results too. Thank you.
I think one more thing that's important. Today we had EJ Carry on. He's a motivational speaker, one of the top youth speakers in the country, come in today and talk to our students. And one of the pieces that he said that I thought was really interesting and caught our students' attention, 85% of the jobs or the careers that our students are going to have in 20 years don't currently exist right now in one way or another. We are not teaching our students to become a specific thing or training them to be in a specific career. We are training them to think critically, to have those options, to tap into their interests, to make the world a better place and ultimately do what is going to make them happy. And I think that was a pretty powerful message to hear as an adult. But then for our students, he reminded them it's all about purpose. If you don't have purpose, you're not going to do your best. If you don't have purpose, it doesn't matter if you're an adult, if you're 10, 12, or 18, you're not going to give it your all. And so the foundation of CCR is touching on all those things, but creating that purpose. Why are we at school? What's our ultimate purpose for our students?
And our Ramp Up to Readiness curriculum really reinforces that unknown quality of our future and encourages kids across multiple pathways. This is not like everybody goes to a 4-year college dynamic. It's pathways going anything that leads to a career. And Ramp Up is very strong on that focus about the future is an unknown and the pathways need to be multiple for individuals.
I have one more question. Sorry, I don't mean to hog it. So, SMART goals. What is your guys' metric or measurable portion with this particular initiative? How are you going to know when you've been successful or where you need to put more effort?
It's a great question. So already, anecdotally, just hearing and talking to students who did not see themselves as a student or didn't see the importance of coming to class. We have students that are some of our regulars in the office that we've had those conversations. One of the pieces that we'd like to look at for this spring is both around student survey as well as stakeholder survey, especially as we move towards our new strategic plan around what are our students seeing, getting feedback from our parents as well as our community around some of the positives or some of the things that we can improve on.
I'd just like to say, I think this sounds really great, and I love that we're starting in middle school and getting them thinking about this. My question will probably go maybe to you, Steve, but so what's happening at the high school? I know you're clearly going to align, and these students will build on this experience when they get to high school. What's happening for the kids that are currently in high school that didn't benefit from this experience earlier?
So the high school admin and counseling team, led by Principal Daniels and Mr. Cook, are talking about the transformation of counseling and how we are changing things to align and to improve the college and career readiness preparation that we have. Obviously, as we have heard multiple times from our students, that has not been a historical strength. And building from the ground up in collaboration between middle school and high school, we are doing all that we can to accelerate the progress and bring this to all of our kids. But obviously, our middle schools currently are going to have some advantages in terms of earlier preparation. And again, that's in response, obviously, in listening to our students and what they actually need and us trying to be as responsive as quickly as possible.
I'd say to that end, Naomi, if there's anything that you want to share that, like, if you were thinking back, what would have been useful in middle school, based on what you have now, that would be super interesting to hear more about.
I don't know. I was thinking like Well, obviously we didn't have any of that. But I was just thinking the whole time, I think it's so cool that you guys are like encouraging them to dream. And like not only encouraging them to dream, but like teaching them how to take action on it. Because I feel like so many of me and my friends are like juniors now, and we're like, all right, math equations are out the door. We need to figure out what we're going to do with our life. Like, this is real now. So, I don't know. I think it all sounds awesome.
You can still do math equations.
Yeah, but like,
You can make a whole career out of it.
So are there
Or a
things now
second
though?
career.
So from where you are right now, are there things that could be done to help you from this point?
I don't know. I think that like counselors like definitely should be changed more because I don't know. My whole like high school career, I think I've only had like one meeting with my counselor that wasn't like that was her coming to me. You know what I mean? So yeah.
The comment and not question that I was going to share is just I'm excited to see what you all do come up with around the community partnerships front, because it is such a huge area of opportunity given the big range of experiences that people in our community have. And I think we probably all hear from community members who want to get involved in the schools and don't know how to do it. And I think we at the schools want them to be involved, but we don't know how to do it either. And so it just feels like there's so much potential, and I am really eager to see what you all come up with and how you can figure out how to maybe make that a little bit more real at the middle school.
There will be excellent opportunities for that when we differentiate between the 3 grade levels next year. So one reason I'm especially excited for next year is that opportunity to kind of hit those social emotional and other opportunities.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, middle school team.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so now I'm going to bring up Mr. Holge to have a conversation with us around where are we in enrollment for our annual class size and enrollment reports.
Thank you. This again is a report that we provide annually to the school board. Much of it is based on our October 1 data as far as the students that are enrolled in Richfield as of October 1. It also requires a lot of information and data gathering from some of the other charter schools, the other open enrollment schools, as well as private schools. And so there's a lot of work that goes into compiling that information and kind of maintaining that. It really does highlight those changes, some of which we've already talked about, but goes into more detail regarding our student demographics as well as our class sizes and some details around that. We'll be covering the PowerPoint presentation as the primary piece, but there's a lot of backup documentation that's also included at the end of this packet as well. This is something that we've seen a couple times since the October 1 count. It really just highlights the changes from what's projected for the current year to what's actual, and it also includes some of the detail about what was actual last year compared to actual this year, and where that sits with the number of students enrolled at each one of the grade levels in each one of the buildings and programs across the district and what the variances were. Just to kind of highlight that, there are 4,277 students district-wide in Richfield, 4,084, which I call our traditional count, although it's now that 4,277 is really our traditional count. The difference there is that inclusion of the voluntary pre-kindergarten program that we started 4 years ago. So with that traditional count, when we look at elementary, middle, high school, our pre-kindergarten is our early childhood special education, and then the Transitions Plus is our 18 and over, served in a special education program. And then 193 voluntary pre-kindergarten students in the district this year. This represents 98 more students than was projected, and 76 more when we factor in the voluntary pre-kindergarten. It also represents 43 students less than 2018-19, which is 53 less with the VPK program as part of that. And just a reminder, we kind of take a look at multiple ways of factoring how our enrollment projections are. We tend to be relatively conservative with our kindergarten, but are also looking at what our most recent trends. We use a complex model that provides about 16 different ways of statistically analyzing our data and our retention from grade level to grade level over a series of 1 year, 4 years, 7 years, and different ways of modeling that with different weighting schemes. We take a look at what was most recent, or which of those models would have been most effective in the past year or the current year when we're projecting the following year. So we're trying to do our best guess. We've seen this swing on both sides where we come up with more students than are projected this year. We've also seen it swing where we come up with significantly less students than projected using similar modeling structures. One of the things that we found is we don't see consistency yet on which of those modeling statistical ways of analyzing it provide consistency, and so that's one of the challenges that we have working through this system. When we look at our 18-19 comparison to our current year 19-20, we see that we're down 53 students overall. Again, those references with the traditional count. We are up 35 students in our early childhood special education program. A lot of this came through identification in our early childhood VPK program as part of that, as well as just increased referrals through that process, or through the process of birth to 4 programming. Elementary is down 77 students, and you can see the breakdown at each one of those buildings. 2 of the buildings, Centennial and Sheridan Hills, are down more than the RDLS and STEM magnet programs are. VPK is down 10 students from actual last year. Middle school is down 20 students. Richfield High School actually ended up 20 students from actual last year. The Richfield Career Education Program is down 6 and transition was up 5. So a lot of variances with the big in our neighborhood elementary schools, and then some of those at the middle school program. This is just another graphic way of looking at it where you can see the trends. The red is that traditional count that we represent, which is the early childhood special education through the Transitions Plus program. And then we see the increase of the VPK program over the last few years, and you can see how that has stabilized our enrollment in a number of different ways. And then there's a gray bar within there that represents what I call our early childhood special education crossover students. So they're students who previously would have been factored into our early childhood special education, but are actually being served in our VPK program. And so that's why we've broken those out, because they would have been counted previously, but they're counted as part of that VPK program now. When we look at our K-5 average class size trend, and again, the detail makeup is in the end of this packet, you can see that relative drop from 2 years ago, slight increase from last year. If you remember, we were down students from what was projected last year. This brought it up to that intentional effort of around 2 student reduction as part of the referendum appeal to the voters. So that's just kind of a way of showing that heightened effort in that area. Elementary class size trend, this shows it and breaks it down by building, by year over the last 6 years, and just see that there's some variances. We target different sections and with numbers of students, but that variation from building to building where we see some reductions or see some increases creates a little bit of difficulty for truly maintaining that on an average basis, especially in some of our buildings where with only 3 or 4 sections at a grade level, it becomes difficult to manage that with a huge swing of one different section can make a difference. This is just another way of looking at it, just that average class size for each one of those buildings for the current year. STEM is up. That is one where we had some increased enrollment from what was projected and saw some variances in that area. When we look at the 6 through 8, you can see that slight increase from last year to 26.37, but relatively consistent and still lower than where we were at 2 years ago with that referendum. And then 9 through 12 just shows that average class size, and we'll see some additional breakdown with some of these pieces as well. You can see that this one went up. We did have some changes in the registration enrollment process that had some unintended consequences, but it's an area that there was some staffing that was also held back that we're looking at reducing those classes here for the second semester, and so making some changes that way to help bring those class sizes down for second semester specifically. Just some more information that breaks it down by the number of sections at each one of those enrollments. So the number of students in that section is at the bottom. The number of sections that are in those grade or enrollment bands or class size bands is in each one of those areas. You can see really we have that middle target of hitting that 25 to 30 is where the bulk of our positions are. The black line on this is the current year, and so you can see where 2 years ago we had over 10 sections that had 35 plus at the middle school. We have 0 that are at that 35 plus this year. So those efforts to bring down those higher class sizes and move more of them into that target range. Just another graphic way of looking at it by those bands of less than 20, less than 25, less than 30, or 30 and more. I'm sorry, the colors don't show up really well here. Obviously, the red is what we want to be avoiding in some of those situations, and having more of that balance in the middle, less than 25 or less than 30 categories. When we look at the high school, we can see that 35 plus, as we've known, we've been working on this semester, did pop up this year because of some of those changes that we had indicated, but are working to address that here in the second semester specifically. Everything else, though, with that black line tends to be lower than what that red line is in most of those areas. High school class sizes trend by school. Again, you can see some of those variances still sitting with most of those in that, or the large number that are in that more than 30. That is our target ratio for that high school, is the 30 area, just because of the number of sections that then also have smaller sections as well. When we move on and start to look at our student demographics in the district and the student diversity, here you can see some relative consistency dating back since 2010, where our students of color represented 67% of our enrollment. This year we're at 71%. You can see that there's a trend that moved up to about 2016 with a high of 72.59%. And that's trickled down a little bit over the last few years to 71.24% students of color. And this year we have 28.76% white students in the district. ELL is another area of specific services that we're providing. Again, relative consistency, we see a slight increase in our ELL, or a slight decrease in our ELL enrollment again this year. This is always one because we tend to look at the high band, but the high band here is the non-ELL students. And that red band represents the ELL students. Yeah. So I know even I caught myself, and I've done this a few times. So with the ELL, you can see that there's been that slight reduction over the last few years, with the high going back to 32.61%. Again, just a reminder for the board and for Allegra as well. A few years ago, we did have a change in identifications where we were identifying students who were could have been transitioning out or would have been transitioning out, and so that identification of ELL is one of the reasons for that large drop from 32% to 26%, was specifically in that identification process. Free and reduced enrollment. Again, we can see that we have another decline in our free and reduced enrollment count in the district, going from 61.59 down to 59.29% this year. Again, we've seen that trend over the last couple of years. After relatively stable since 2015, where it popped down from a 66%, but up until 2017, you can see that it floated around that 65%, and now we're this year down under 60% in our free and reduced enrollment population. One of the factors, just when we start talking about the budget process, this obviously impacts our compensatory revenue in the district, and so we've seen declines over the last couple of years and projected for next year. When we look at enrollment options, so kind of moving past demographics and looking at the students that are choosing Richfield, the students that are choosing other districts, one of the things that we want to be very intentional about in the district is making sure that we're serving our students. We're attracting students into the district and maintaining the resident enrollment. Open enrollment is one of the options that students have available. This shows a comparison of the largest areas of open enrollment. It's not surprising that they tend to be neighboring districts like Bloomington, Edina, and Minneapolis. And this just shows some of those transitions. So the first set of columns is this year, 1920 students coming into the district from these communities. The next is 1920 students going out of Richfield to these districts. What that net impact is of those leaving, those coming, and how that changed. And then the next three are the 1819, so looking at last year's data and how that compares. So you can see that Bloomington, we have a net impact of -7 students between the two. Where there's a positive for Richfield is there's a change of 37 students actually from last year. We had a -44 net impact with more students leaving than coming. Now that's coming closer to 0. Burnsville, we actually gained students coming from Burnsville, very similar to where it was last year. Edina, we see an increase in the number of students that are open enrolling out into Edina in comparison to those that are coming in. Minneapolis, we see reductions in both our ins and outs, with a net impact of 129 students coming to Richfield from Minneapolis. a change of net change of -7 from last year. Rosemount, relatively consistent, 5 students compared to 11 students last year. St. Paul, 10 and 12. And then SEC is kind of our anomaly. It is a 287 district. It shows up as an open enrollment option out. However, these students are also through a fiscal host agreement with 287. They tend to come back to in the spring as Richfield students as part of our student enrollment funding and things like that. So it's they're being served by Richfield or by 287 in an arrangement with Richfield, but it shows up in that area as an open enrollment program. Net impact, we have 140 students netting out in those enrollment options as a negative compared to 127 last year with about a 13 student change in that factor. When you look at the 10 students in SEC, it seems to be relatively consistent across the other districts outside of that SEC arrangement. This is just another graphic way of looking at that trend going back to 2005 on the enrollment options. The other area that we look at are non-public and charter schools. And then again, looking at specifics within these areas. 406 total students going to non-public schools from Richfield, which is a decrease of 21 students from 18-19. Blessed Trinity, homeschooling, Holy Angels, and Annunciation are the largest areas. Just kind of a note as you look at some of the details, Annunciation is a school that was identified last year as individuals knowing that people go to Annunciation, but they hadn't been reporting to us for a number of years. And so last year, after the Where We Are in Enrollment report, we did seek that out and included that information in the detail, as well as in some of the summary data for the current year. It also shows last year's numbers for Annunciation, so that will be a variation from last year's actual open enrollment, but we did update that once we got that information from Annunciation. And just kind of a way of, we don't have a clean way. Non-public schools are supposed to be reporting to the home school district where they have students. They're not always excited about doing that or open to doing that. And so when we find out about things, we go out and seek it out or kind of have that. A few years ago, we also had Cristo Rey, which hadn't been reporting, and we saw a large increase in our non-publics because of that specifically. But the trend, it's difficult to go too far back on the trend because we don't have that information all the way. And then charter schools, we have 745 total students going out to charter schools, which is an increase of 66 students from 18-19. Again, most of those in the area, Seven Hills, Partnership Academy, Hiawatha, Eagle Ridge, SciTech Academy, which is newer Richfield charter school, as well as Watershed Academy are the largest in that charter school enrollment. Again, mostly geographic in that area. And then we tend to look at what we call the Retain Richfield. So as we look at making sure that we're serving the Richfield community, making sure that families who are choosing to live here are who we're serving and who we're focused on, making sure that we retain those, as well as drawing students from all across the area, but with that heavy focus on making sure we're serving the Richfield community. This just kind of shows that detail going back to 2010. We see a slight reduction from last year from 66.44% to 65.52% for the current year. So relatively stable, but a slight reduction that we continue to monitor. And with that, I'd be available for any questions. All the detail with that report is included in additional backup information in the board packet as well.
Craig, I have some questions on the class size at the high school. The slide seemed, it didn't, the bar chart you had didn't match the jagged lines in terms of the 35 plus difference was massive this year versus prior, but when you went to the bar chart, it didn't seem to show up there. I'm just curious if we have it right. That one. So you can see there's a massive gap between 35 plus between this year and prior.
Yep.
And then, but if you go to the bar chart, they're only about 10 or 20 apart, and it just doesn't seem like. I know it's 30 plus versus 35,
Yeah,
but it's
so that would be the difference.
That's the difference. Okay. What is the largest we have?
That is going to be.
Okay, it's
Yeah, I can't.
40. Okay.
That is,
yeah,
sorry,
that's okay.
it's in the back.
It's in the back. That's fine. I'll dig it out.
So what you'll find in that back section is you can see that actual count and tabulation of how many are in each one of those areas by subject, by content area.
And I know we had talked early in this school year about the challenges of having some of the classes that are less than fully enrolled, whether they're AP or fourth year language or things like that attract relatively fewer students, have an impact somewhere else on larger classes. And so it's a balance we have to find, but we do hope to improve in second semester.
Yeah, I think Steve has been working with the high school admin team to kind of really drill down and make some improvements. As I indicated before, they held back some staffing because of the enrollment process and how they were identifying kids, that they're able to now allocate and still have that hit to make that improvement.
And changing subjects, the reduction in the slight downtick in free and reduced lunch population, do our outreach workers and social workers feel as though that's not because people have chosen not to hand in the forms? Or are we still getting the same interaction with families and getting I just want to know, is it real or is it a paperwork challenge?
I think it's a combination. So I know that our building teams have been working really hard every year to really make sure that they're reaching out and drawing with that enrollment. I think that we're seeing some families who previously qualified who no longer qualify because of changes. So that's part of it. But then we do also have challenges getting those documents from all of the students and all of the families. So I think it's a combination of those options or those reasons.
Great. Just on the same note, do you know what percentage of students we have this information for? Like what percentage of this do we actually know versus we just don't have a form, so therefore they're counted as non-free and reduced lunch?
I do not have that specific information. Families can refuse to turn in the forms.
No, I know they can.
Yeah.
I want to know how many do we actually
What percentage
know
have?
versus what percentage do we not, because they have chosen for a variety of
We
reasons.
can
to
look and
not
see
share
what
that.
information we have. I'll look and see what we have.
It
I
would
think
be
we
great
have 3
to have
different,
some.
like no application, applied and rejected, and applied and qualified, I believe, are the 3 areas that we have. So we can track it down.
Just one more question. This has always made me wonder, the open enrollees inbound, do we have a sense of how they line up with our various measurables to the district at large? Right, so we have a number of things that appear on dashboards or other reports that we have, whether it's is the diversity the same as the whole student body, is English language learner, free and reduced lunch. Do we have participation in activities for those who are at the high school? When that's something that appears in one of our dashboards. We look at later on tonight. We look at things like suspendable incidents. Are they comparable to the broader student body or not? Just want to know, are we attracting more just like us, or is it something very different?
Yeah, we don't have the data on all of that. Specifically, obviously, participation in activities and that component of it. I can see if we have that access to information for open enrollment. I know we don't have for the non-publics, and I don't believe we have for the private or for the charter
No, I'm
schools
not
as
asking
well.
about the people who leave us.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about, we have a sixth of
coming in.
our student body is not from our district, and
Okay.
so how do they measure against the averages that are here? I'm not asking to separate.
Okay, so the current,
Yeah, just
Okay.
the ones who are with us, are they just like the rest of the district, or not? In some way.
I don't know the answer
No,
to that, but
I
I
don't
haven't
expect
looked
you to
into it.
know off the top.
We
of
can
your
see if we
head.
can find out.
It'd be kind of a side project for you in your spare time. All right, thank you.
I have a question that might be for Steve. Do compensatory dollars follow enrolled students to their buildings, or is it
For the
separate?
most part, yes. Yes, we put almost all of the compensatory dollars into staffing within the buildings.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Then enrollment we know has been a concern for a while. And I noticed that the community schools have had bigger losses than our magnet schools, and I'm curious to know if that's just a correlation, but I don't know if that's really something. seeing where the kids are going. A lot of them are actually, more of them are leaving to charter schools than they are to neighboring districts. So I'm just curious to know about that first question, and then like I'd like to know how we are looking at that whole. What have we done to try to give that other, that little something? Because I think for a lot of families, and I know like it happens in Minneapolis as well, like we are gaining a lot from them. I know there's a lot of gentrification happening, so that means that, neighborhoods change, and then, like all those Burnsville students, I'm pretty sure has to do with people being priced out of their rentals or homes. But I think that the numbers from RDLS and STEM make me think that schools that have something different to offer are maybe more attractive than others that are not. So it's like, how do we make community schools more attractive, I guess?
So that's exactly one of the things we found out when we did that broader community survey. So if you remember, we did a survey of parents who were choosing Richfield schools, parents that were choosing charter schools, and parents that were choosing to open enroll. And what we found out is students that are choosing some of those other options were looking for specific programs. And we hadn't been very good at communicating what is that we have. We've been working to put together those materials that really identify what are the strengths of that. A lot of it tends to be around the relationships and the community and the neighborhood feel. So that's where the community will pull more towards those if they're living in that area. But at the same time, we've tried to identify what makes them a little bit unique and a little bit different. So when people are looking at our neighborhood schools, as well as our dual language school and our STEM school, how do we really promote those programs specifically as another very viable, strong option that works for a lot of parents and families? So we've been working on it from the communications and marketing side and drawing that. But kind of that looking and shopping and finding out what the options are tends to be something that more and more parents are doing. And so we're trying to make sure we're being responsive to that. Certainly have some options to look at programming as part of that continuously, but
I know I get postcards from those charter schools at my house, and I receive communication from, I've noticed a very, very proactive effort to enroll my 3-year-old in preschool, which is like I got a personal phone call, emails, she got registered. I mean, we'll see if she makes it because, numbers, but the thing is that I don't see that in our other programs, that kind of outreach. And I'm curious, it might be something that we could do with those mailers, because really, like, there's schools there that I know. I don't even know where they're located, but I know the names because I get the postcards like, come check us out. And we are doing this, already doing this, come see us, open houses for next year. And it's, this is in December, so.
Yeah. So for next year, we moved up a couple things just to kind of highlight. We already did have a kindergarten enrollment kickoff back in November to try to kind of jumpstart that, where traditionally we waited until December. We've had parents that are wanting to come look and wanting to come tour our schools that have reached out and had that on an active piece. So this year we really intentionally moved that effort up to November because we saw that's what was happening as charter schools and other districts were looking at that, especially with their kindergarten enrollment, is where we focused most of our efforts. And some of that included some district mailings and district communications across students that we know are involved in programs and stuff, or prospective students that are identified as part of a screening process. So we've been working to improve that timeline to make sure we're not just waiting until January if people haven't been out looking, and really inviting people in. I think we had a really exciting event in November with the number of families that were attending. We highlighted, we had bus rides that they could participate in. We had a dinner that they could have, shared information about programs. Each one of our elementary schools had a room where they were able to talk about their program, meet the principal, meet a couple of the kindergarten teachers, and have that relationship and experience to start that piece. So we're excited about where that was started, but we still are going to continue to work in that area specifically too.
Couple of things that I just wanted to make sure we do say out loud is the continued decrease that is evident on that last slide around retaining Richfield is really problematic. It's at almost 10% in less than 10 years. And it's something that we obviously talk about a lot. But I think we need to talk about the fact that our efforts are not changing it. And in fact, it is continuing. And so I was thinking about that study that you mentioned that we did a year and a half ago, and could be a good time to come back to that and have more conversation about what have we done in the last year and a half. I think the communication efforts are really clear, but what are some of the other transition points that we really identified, and being able to look at those strategies. I think related to this, I'm also curious if there's any way for us to understand if this continued decrease is actually similar to what other districts are experiencing. Is this part of the just increased competition and people making different choices? I feel like I don't have a great sense if we are typical or atypical in the amount of decrease that we are experiencing over this same amount of time. And I think that would help me personally understand what my level of concern should be.
We're gonna
Please.
agreed on the observations. Obviously, I think that it's a really tough question to answer, because I think one of our biggest challenges is having an apples to apples comparison. You know, if we look at our immediate neighbors, we can see that already. Well, even just with our immediate neighbors, we really can't find an apples to apples comparison. Because every district is bringing in its unique set of demographics, its unique geography, etc. I think that so anyway, I think that it's important and always has to be taken with a grain of salt, because it's so hard to really understand cause and effect with some of this stuff. So to me, what always seems to really correlate, and this is coming from now, starting on the board in 2007, so I've actually kind of observed a lot of this timeline is essentially the economy. We see a big spike. We hit the 2008 recession, and we see a spike in our enrollment. And so as the broader economy causes people to retrench and to say, well, I'm gonna kind of just pair into what's just essential. I think we're gonna see an increase in people choosing their quote unquote easy option, public school wise, for their kids. So we have a period of sustained economic growth, very slow but sustained economic growth. We see our enrollment dipping market share wise, as I think we see people making those other choices. So again, I think it's very difficult to infer cause and effect, and we have to have multiple targets that we're shooting for, knowing that this particular number is, I think, under the influence of a lot of externalities.
Looks like Paula has something to say.
Yeah.
Bloomington gains about 200 a year, according to their annual report.
Thank you.
Not from here.
Not all from here.
Yeah.
They're about equal. Yeah.
I think, Rizzo, what you're saying about like how are we faring, I think thinking about the percentage wise and not really number, because if I look at Minneapolis, it's like, oh my goodness, like we gained 100 and change, but they have 10 times as many students as we do, I think, right?
Yep.
So
Right.
then
But are we looking a lot more like Minneapolis in terms of our market share number?
right, and that's those percentage, those numbers, because like we are really smaller, and then we're losing a lot to Edina, and I know Edina is also really they're bigger. So in that perspective, it really makes me worried about us, because it's a big share of our enrollment.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of it, and I I know that we have been doing with marketing, things are getting better, and I know that we just need, I don't know, I'm getting, I think, Peter, like you said, you know, 4 years, right? Like I'm getting into year 5, and it's frustrating and very concerning because we are doing a lot of great things. But as a marketing, you know, enrollment and all of that, it doesn't show, right? Like our numbers don't
Yeah,
the
think,
customers are not.
Correct. And I think to me, that's where I'm really most interested in, because what I find to be the key number is of 311 children who enroll kindergarten for the matriculating class of 2035 or whatever it's going to be, you know, how many of those 311 kids are we able to keep? And that's I feel where we're, you know, where we do see a leak.
Right.
It feels like once we get them in the door, we really need to keep them.
Yeah.
Right, retention.
Which is all the information that we gathered a year and a half ago, which was, I think, so helpful and so clear about what was leading people to make the decisions that they need to make. So I think I would just, again, maybe it's time to come back to that and just have additional review and conversation about what we learned. And I know that the team here has been doing a lot to follow up on those things. So I think maybe just an update, a year and a half after we made that investment, and now that we can see sort of just where we are, could be good to revisit.
I'll repeat again, I sound like a broken record, I guess, but really the outreach that we do more one-on-one, I think that's a big area for growth. Because I know that we do the surveys, but who's filling out the surveys, right? Like those are very voluntary things. And I know for the retention, you know, from hearing what the community had to talk about in the last few months when I was more out and about, there's some issues too that are for retention purposes that have to do with concerns that families have that they haven't felt have been resolved. And it may be because they haven't reached out to the school, right, to resolve them. But I think with an outreach effort to like really what's going on and really getting that feel of how our families are feeling and what can we do, because we can have a million ideas, but they're the ones who are dealing with the school and, you know, their students every day. So we are providing a lot, but are we providing what our community is looking for?
That is the question.
I think those are some important questions for us to look at. I think it's important for us to take a look at what other districts are doing and also summarize the things that we're doing. And also, I would also echo that it's important that we don't jump to conclusions about what those reasons are. So I think that does give us some things to look at and try to bring back to the board.
Yep. Most importantly, have strategic perseverance. Yeah, because we know that if we're too reactive, I guess, to the numbers, then we may be reacting without purpose.
Right. So, I mean, I think there are some themes that we know for sure, right? Regardless of the numbers, we know that we can do a set of things better. We have the conversation here all the time. We are very good at getting things done. We need to consistently improve on our implementation, and we need to become more effective at doing things well, including communications, including marketing, including customer service, including all of the things that we're doing that lead to the outcomes that are inconsistent. There are things that we have to definitely improve upon. Those are things that we want to continue working on, regardless of those numbers. But we also have some tasks to bring back to the board in terms of reporting back. What are some of those numbers and what are some of the things to look at? All right, so last piece, and we're going to have Mr. Holge try to look at to try to drive me forward in the board packet to the superintendent update, which is around, I think, page 61, give or take. So, as a reminder, we finalized my goals, and my goals are a way of aligning the work that I'm doing as the superintendent to our strategic plan and our strategic planning process. This will be a relatively brief update because really all that we've done is just put a little bit of data and process data in just to update because this is sort of that first mid-course update of the year. I'm talking about aligning my work to student achievement, process goals, which are those strategic plan activities, and then my overall performance, which will come out as our evaluation. Student achievement goals include increasing the graduation rate by 3% and then also closing the gap between the highest and lowest groups of students. And what we did in each of these slides is put in the data based on our fall data to show where we are in terms of our 2008 actuals, our 2009 goals, 18 actuals, 19 goals, and then also taking a look at our gaps and where we are between some of our highest and lowest outcomes in terms of our students. Similarly, in terms of TS Gold, we're looking for a proficiency of 85% or higher on all of our student groups. Taking a look at what our fall 1920 actuals are, and taking a look at this data helps us to notice, obviously, that we need to put some additional focus into math, into our pre-K classrooms, where students are entering at a lower level than they were last year. Taking a look at MCA math and using our work with the MAP testing or the NWA, which helps us to project where the map is. So looking not only just at overall proficiency, also looking at growth based on what we would anticipate for our scores for our students to be. And then also, again, looking at gaps in both reading and in math for our students and putting those into my goals to make those clear for everyone to see. Where are we now? What are those gaps between our highest and lowest achieving or outcomes for our students? And so what are some of the things that we will judge our overall achievement and my goals based on? Then also taking a look at suspendable incidences and doing some of that work. And we'll be adding in, taking a look from a school's perspective and percentage perspective of what each of those means, some of the things that board members have asked for. But taking a look at where we are currently in terms of overall suspendable incidences and comparing that to last year and some of those gaps between highest incident groups of students and lowest incident group of students. And we put those in both as duplicated and then also non-duplicated as something the board had wanted to look at. So we were individualizing duplicated, meaning students who have multiple suspensions, and non-duplicated, meaning a group that would be just one set of students. Then, looking at implementing radical hospitality, where we do launch a staff and community survey coming in February 2020. And so that is in process. Working on elementary rollout of our Bridges math curriculum, looking at the work that we're doing in teaching and learning and our surveys of professional development. Continuing that revision and presentation of vision cards, B presented in December, and coming back with vision card D coming in the next couple of meetings. Aligning our booster efforts and fundraising efforts district-wide, where our activities advisory continues to do that work. They'll be meeting again Wednesday to keep trying to align what we're doing and create a clear system of what are we trying to raise funds for and how are we aligning the work of our boosters and all of our clubs that support our students. As we learned today, is we want to continue expanding our branding and messaging, where we want to increase our market share, where we are in enrollment. So obviously that number from a market share perspective, not overly successful, and going to continue on as we keep trying to add applications and continue to grow our market share as we move towards the future. And then leading strategic planning efforts to create that new strategic plan for 2020, where we had our process presentation, and then our first community-wide meeting will be held on January 14th with a wide range of smaller group meetings, actually beginning as early as this Friday with the Latino Family Association, which will be happening Friday evening in this boardroom. Expanding our social emotional work as we continue to focus on the mental and social emotional health and needs of our students to continue with that emotional support model. And you heard some of the additional pieces that we're doing within our classrooms. And then continuing to deepen that staff unity and create that one Richfield identity along with our marketing and branding. And again, measuring that from our staff and our team in that staff survey coming up in February. And then looking to increase presence, voice, and participation of families representative of the diversity of Richfield Public Schools and finding different ways to engage all of our families and engage voice, not just where we have a large group meeting, but also going out to our families and finding ways to get voice and partnership in different ways than we have historically looked at. And then finalizing some of that work with my yearly evaluation, which will combine data from our survey, feedback from direct reports, feedback from the board, where we then go into evaluation and finalize some of that work. So again, this was just designed as an update just to remind us of where we are. We'll have more substantial things in the coming months as we will continue to take some pretty significant steps over the next couple of months, and a more substantial report probably around March, April, prior to that final report that happens in June. In fact, are there any questions?
I just have one comment. The TS Gold data is so consistent in the 18-19 scores for every group, which almost defies logic. I just question
I
it.
noticed that.
So I would.
So if we could double check that, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
So are the scores there? I don't believe they're cut and pasted incorrectly, I would say. I will double check that. What I believe is that there was some implementation needs, and I will double check this, but there are some implementation needs that we focused on this year. But we'll double check that prior to.
And it doesn't really matter because they're not part of this year's goals. They were last year, but as long as the all student, if the all student number is right, then we'll be fine. But the breakdown to the 18-19 is just so strangely consistent. It would defy just about every standardized test in the history of standardized tests.
And it would call into question what happens then once kids enter school that it's so sharp.
Right.
diverges.
But yet 19-20, I mean, unfortunately has volatility by group that would match the rest of them, and so I want to live in the world with the 18-19 scores. So if we could make that happen, that would be good work.
Before the kids get to school, right?
That's right. That's right. That's not a good positive statement either.
Yes. Understood.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Any other comments or questions just for the brief update? I don't see any. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda we would move to is approval of the consent agenda containing routine business items. As always, if there is something that a board member would like removed for individual consideration, that could be requested at this time. If there is no such request, we could entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Cole. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the consent agenda is approved. I think we are gonna move ahead and do a couple of the old business items at least before we take our break. We'll see how quickly we get through old business. We could potentially do it between old and new. I'm just gonna play it by ear. With that, we will start with 2 items related to our facilities work across the district.
Okay, thank you very much. The first is a series of change orders related to the Richfield STEM project. Really, it's something that we've been looking at. We're now at change orders 11, 12, and 13. Total net impact of these is $146,003.49. Various mechanical and ceiling modifications due to HVAC, unit ventilator and heat exchange programs, as well as the addition of an HVAC duct insulation required by code. Some additional architectural modifications, some electrical changes. Total project now is at $171,385, up from $15,025,382. All of the detail associated with those is included in the additional package if you want additional information.
Thank you. Any questions about the RSTEM change orders?
And I already asked just to confirm that we're still within our contingency budget on all of those. That's
correct. We've been focused on that, making sure that we know that we have a number of bids that are coming in, making sure that we are watching what that is, and it all is well within that contingency at this point.
Greg, it would help if you list original project cost was, but that's the original project cost listed within the packet here is merely the cost before this increase. There was an original project cost.
What was that original amount? Because
what's listed in here is I mean the change order of $146,003.49 is the difference between what's listed as original and new updated costs. And so there is an original out there.
Yeah.
And so I guess our concerns about where we are relative to
That's
things,
fair.
we wouldn't be asking if it was there.
Good evening. So on each one of the actual change orders that you'll see, they're titled like CCO number 11, 12, or 13. If you scroll down, it will say an original contract sum, which is that $14,800,000. It's very small on my computer right now.
Okay,
So that was the actual original contract that was issued for the project.
14.8, okay.
Yep, and then you can see the changes to date, or previously, and then the ones today, to get the total sum.
So we're 371,000 higher than the original.
Correct. And that's within the contingency that we set aside for each individual project.
Okay, thank you.
Very helpful.
2.5%?
So we could entertain a motion to approve the 3 RSTEM change orders if someone is so moved.
I would move approval of the 3 RSTEM change orders.
I will second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the change orders are approved, and we will move to RHS change orders.
Thank you. Again, here we have 3 more change orders with a net impact of $223,120.91. $183,136 for building code review modifications for fire ratings and existing building finish changes. $24,000 for kitchen drains, powers, lighting modifications, and additional floor prep, and $5,822 for electrical and mechanical modifications. Total cost of this project is now $36,143,660. With that increase, original cost on this was $430,000. So we'd ask for your approval on that as well.
I will second the RHS change orders.
How about-
I will not second.
You wanna lead it? First, you lead it.
I heard somebody else.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Mishek. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the change orders are approved. Next, we have a administrative guideline and board policy related to wellness and nutrition that Superintendent Unesky will share.
Yes, all right, so as we talked about at our last meeting and reviewed a standard procedure which ended the possibility of alternative meals, we talked about creating a board policy / guideline that would align that and create that as a board level oversight opportunity as a board guideline. As I was reviewing and beginning to work with the MSBA model policy, which you saw at our last meeting, which left a lot to be desired, I was reviewing all of our policies, and 112, the wellness policy, and 112.1 talks a lot about meals and nutritious meals. And this is something that aligns to some of the work that we are doing. And so what I decided to do is propose that we create guideline 112.2, which then aligns to wellness policy, which would then be wellness, nutrition services, operation, and meal charges. And so what this guideline would do would be to talk about how we are aligning our overall wellness program to nutrition and our nutrition operations, and then also our meal charges. And so that would create the alignment to the USDA expectation, but also bring that up to the board level, while not creating a separate policy that sat by itself, but going in a policy that it integrated well into. As you'll note, talking about the purpose, it's really to ensure that we promote the nutritional health of our students while also promoting the social emotional health of our students and making sure that we are offering a wide variety of meals and then looking at payment for meals. And so what we have in front of us is a first draft of some of those pieces to talk about payment. How do we encourage payment? How do we communicate payment? It reminds us that under the statute that we are requiring and we are ensuring that all students will have full meals, which is something we have always done, regardless of whether or not they qualify for free or reduced lunch and regardless of lunch balance. Also, talking about some of the complexities and beginning to delve into some of the complexities of a la carte meals or a la carte options, double entrees and or snacks, and how will we begin to handle that. Trying to lay out some clarification around negative account balance notification for elementary students and for secondary students. Creating clarifications, and this is one of the biggest complexities that we found we have at point of sale, which is how do things happen when students arrive at their point of sale, and they may or may not at that time have a negative account balance. And then also some clarifications around communication about how we will communicate, how we will not, and then our responsibilities in regard to communication of policy. And so, as is our practice, this is a first read of a proposed brand new guideline, addendum to Board Policy 112, which would then have us review several times prior to possibly moving forward. So again, this is that first draft of taking the standard practice and making it larger as that board oversight and guidance. I will say I've already received multiple points of input.
All right. I just have a couple. There's the comment I've made before about when the account balance is below a certain threshold, not when the student owes. That
did not
appears
get
in
in
there.
here,
It's in there, like
Okay.
elementary number 4, and also in the communication. So food nutrition staff service can communicate balances, but are not expected to be part of the collecting. If a student says, "What do I do to address that?" Do they stand there mute, or do they have an answer? We may get into some real fine detail on this because it was the lack of precision on the prior version we had that led to we didn't know what to do when it was implemented poorly. And so, like, that is a simple question. Well, what do we do? Well, if someone says, "I can't answer that," that sounds like a strange question to me. A student is asking for guidance from an adult in the building, and they're offered none. Right, so that's how I.
So communication, clarity around how should nutrition services people respond.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So.
I emailed you too,
Mhm.
but I think overall what I would be looking for are some very specific plans on implementation about what is expected and what is not okay. I think we all thought that we knew what was not okay before, but it clearly needed to be said because what we didn't want to happen. So I think making sure that we're very clear and specific about how we are going to implement some of these things. And I also, like, for example, 3C, if they have a negative account balance, a la carte snack or double entree items won't be available. How are we going to make them unavailable? And how are we going to do that in a respectful way? And then I think your comment about their statement about the point of sale, how will we do that? I also think it's important for us to document things like our notification, our communications to families for us and for the families. So I think we've had problems with our notification systems historically, and so making sure that we have documentation that we are getting that information, to our families and that they are receiving it. So I feel like documentation being very specific, especially about things like implementation.
Absolutely.
That echoed in large part the very long list of items that I also shared with the superintendent after seeing the first draft. I do think it's a solid start. I think it's bringing together pieces that reflect conversations that we have had in the past, but also more recently. And so that I'm really excited to see starting to come together. And I think as we go through these next drafts, we're going to end with a product that I think will be stronger and better.
It is, and especially an improvement upon what we saw from the MSBA general policy. I feel like it is much more in line with where we want to get. So you're going in the right direction.
Since it's in here for support, are we, reading through like guideline 112.1, I found some curious things there. And I'm just things that seem, someone said that there would be like a coffee bar at the high school, but we are not allowed to sell caffeinated beverages, according to 112.1. The staff are supposed to model water consumption positively. That sounds, not realistic. I'm not faulting staff. It's just the things that are in there. And then there's some other.
To come back and look at all of it.
Yeah,
together.
there's some other things within there that I would love to revisit. Even though there is so much in that in 112.1 that I find at a level of minutia that is completely unreasonable to expect in the world in which I live. That like there will never be any food in a classroom except stuff that's USDA healthy. Just doesn't probably happen in the real world.
Well, at my school, we were gifted water bottles to encourage the staff to drink more water. So I guess there are subtle ways of, but I don't think putting it in policy is a.
The question with that I would have is, so we were looking and we are working our way through the cycle of the 5-year rotation. We have, I believe, was it 11 or 12? Anybody remember from earlier?
11.
It's 11 policies we still need to make it through, either in this year or we'll say this calendar year, to get ourselves caught up to the cycle. Would you like us to add in 112 and 112.1 ahead of cycle, as they are connected to 112.2, which I am fine to do?
Yes.
I think since the new one is leaning on the other side heavily, we should probably take
And we
them
will
all.
play around with 112 and 112.1. And there's an additional addendum to 112.1. There's like a 112.1a. We'll play with that one too. So we'll take all 4 of those, including this new rewrite simultaneously, which will put off some of our other policy work a little bit.
That's
So
great.
you're like input from all of us then?
Yes, we should definitely then, as you continue looking at 112.2 and send me any notes, which I already have some pretty extensive board notes on that. We're going to also then take a look at 112 and 112.1 and work our way through the entirety of the wellness policy again.
Well, and maybe we might have to have a little extra long meeting and keep our other policies on the track.
Absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely.
Obviously, we should prioritize if there are things that are urgent and need our attention. We should be bumping those up, and we could be okay not getting through all 11 if not all of them require our attention.
And we have, in that transformation, we have prioritized those that we needed to get to earlier, the ones that are legally required.
Okay, seeing nothing else on this and knowing that we're going to have a lot of time to continue working on this, let's move ahead to revisiting the polling place resolution that we passed in December. We need to come back to it because of an omission.
Yes, so we just can't get enough of it. So we also wanted to come back and add Fort Snelling Precinct -01, which also impacts Richfield, which we need to add to this overall list. And so we just need to go back and just as a reminder, once we have, we'll say repassed this resolution, because it has to happen once, it has to be enacted for the entire year. We will then, Ms. Valley in Communications will create a handy-dandy polling place advertisement piece that clarifies the ones that are in Edina, the ones that are in Richfield, and the ones that are at Fort Snelling, to make sure that this is distributable and something that people can understand quite easily.
Is there a motion to approve the amended polling places?
So moved.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Cole and a second by Ms. Malik. Any discussion? As this is a resolution, I will pull the board. Cole.
Aye.
Tensing.
Aye.
Smishek.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Paulus.
Hi.
The chair votes aye and the resolution passes. And it feels like this is a good time for us to take a brief, approximately 5-minute recess. So I would make the motion to do so. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will recess. We will recess for a few moments. Thank you. All right, we are back from our brief recess and are going to move into the new business section item of the agenda. First up is a resolution to award the contract for Richfield Middle School facilities work.
Yep, thank you. So this is, as you indicated, a contract to award the Richfield Middle School Facilities Project. The recommendation from ICS and from the administration is to award that to Shaw Lundquist for the base bid of $16,701,000. We did receive 3 bids on this project, and there's a detailed resolution that's requested here because we are actually requesting that we reject one of the bids. One of the bids came in and hadn't fully complied with the bid. They had submitted an alternative, or the original bid form instead of an alternative bid form. had also made changes on their bid form and adjusted that without initialing those, which is actually required by statute. So we sought counsel from Jay Squires of Rupp Anderson Squires and Waldsberger, and he indicated that rejecting that bid specifically was something that we would have to do. And so we were recommending that we award that bid to Corval at this point. There's a detail in that resolution that identifies all of these pieces with statutory references that we can go through if you'd like. Otherwise, that really serves to provide the bulk of that information.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions? Everything was very clear, I thought.
So just a question, is the resolution a single thing that both rejects the one bid, the lowest bid received as basically an invalid bid and award it simultaneously awards?
Correct. Yep. And that resolution was drafted by legal counsel to make sure it was fully compliant.
I'll move the resolution as presented.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Malik. Is there any further discussion? As this is a resolution, I will pull the board. Cole?
Aye.
Tensing?
Aye.
Smishek?
Aye.
Malik? Aye. Paulus?
Aye.
The chair votes aye and the resolution passes. Next we have a memorandum of agreement for driver hiring and referral incentives.
Thank you. And I'm quickly trying to move to that, but I'll just reference it on the screen up here as well. So we did enter into an agreement with our SEIU 284 union that represents our buildings, grounds, and transportation. As we've been discussing, there's a general challenge of finding bus drivers to fill positions. There's a lot of marketing and opportunities that are out there, both with private contractors as well as with other school districts. One of the things that we found from a market standpoint is that other contractors or providers were issuing incentive awards for individuals to come into the district, as well as referral bonuses for individuals who might be identifying individuals who are within that group. Part of that recommendation really is kind of making sure that we're honoring employees who are currently in the program, providing them opportunities to receive some compensation as part of this. So that memorandum of agreement has been approved by SEIU 284, and it's coming to the board for approval here tonight.
Any comments or questions on this one?
And just to clarify within it, the incentive is, there are some restrictions on who it can be, reading through quickly, but we don't have to identify, but either $1,000 or $1,300, up to $1,000 and $1,300.
Yeah, correct. So
incentive for someone new with a referral of $300 for an existing employee who helps find us a qualified person. Okay.
So sorry, it's been a while since I worked on this
No,
one
that's okay.
specifically.
I mean, I'm reading straight from it. I just want to make sure that it's said out loud.
So the incentive for a driver who does not have a CDL, because we do provide some of that training for the individuals who coming in without the CDL, so they have the $1,000 incentive paid out over the course of a year at different increments, making sure that they fulfill a probationary period. We're not just awarding that day once and when somebody comes in, and then we're all of a sudden without that driver because they've chosen to go someplace else. So it's incremented that way. $1,300 for additional compensation for those who have their driver's CDL with those payments at similar pieces. And then that $300 referral incentive payment for individuals who are referred with some qualifications that it has to be somebody who didn't just quit to come back to be referred as part of that process and things like that, that just put some guidelines in place.
Motion if there are no other questions or concerns.
I'll move the item as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Mr. Tensing. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the memorandum of agreement is approved. Next is a first read of one of our existing board policies that is up for review.
Yes, one that has needed for review for quite some time, and so you're going to see a pattern of three different things you have. You have the original Richfield policy dated back in 2004. You see the MSBA updated policy, And then you see I will call it not even quite yet a first draft. It is sort of the red line comparison. The red line comparison between what the MSBA current policy is and the Richfield policy. And so we did a lot of work to do that comparison and show some of the major overhaul and changes to what is a state required and statutory required law. And in 2009, there was a large number of changes that were made in terms of methods that might be used if needed to remove students, specifically students with IEPs, from school grounds. And so Dr. Clarkson, our expert in special education, has worked her way through this, also utilizing our legal partner to create that first overhaul. And so just getting us familiar with that. So I'm asking for a first read tonight. And then if there are questions over the next coming weeks, because again, this is a very large overhaul of the policy. So you're gonna see almost everything rewritten as new as a red line, and then we're gonna do some refining in that next draft.
Any high-level questions or comments people do want to share this evening?
We do have I do. We have a policy that we reviewed probably in the last year or so, something about interaction between police and students in general. Should these be merged or should they remain separate? Is there?
We can certainly, we'll take a look at that. It is, I think it's 977, or it's in the 900s, it's cooperation with law enforcement. And we can certainly look if those integrate well.
Okay, it's possible they don't, okay.
Yeah.
And this one is specifically required by state statute, so that's the one thing that I'm not sure if that's why it wouldn't make sense to merge them. Because
It's easier to point to it as a standalone and say,
Yeah.
And
there it
the
is.
statute changes or.
Okay. But there should be, to the extent that there's something general about the interact,
they should align.
there should be alignment.
We should make sure that, yes, once we clean up all the red gobbledygook, we'll make sure that the language aligns
thanks.
in terms of that, yes.
Absolutely. See lots of reading faces. Any other questions or comments?
And just as
It's
a
lot.
reminder,
I know
there is
it's a
no
lot.
huge pressure to give comments today. This is at least a 3-read process. We usually do 3 reads, but when there's a large transformation, sometimes we do even more. And so if there are things in the next couple of weeks that you have in terms of feedback as you peruse and reflect, those are things that definitely you should get to us.
Am I correct in the observation that at the present time that the red line is pretty much just getting our policy in alignment with MSBA model policy?
Yes, for the most part, what we did is we worked to take what we have and update it to the policy. And then if there are refinements that we would make, let's say
there's
to
further refinements
make
yet
it
to
Richfield
come.
2020,
Yeah.
those are the things we would tend to do in the next couple of reads. That's kind of the pattern we're trying to take administratively, especially when there are such large overhauls. So that we can process, here's the new legal changes, and let's also make sure some of those other pieces.
Are people comfortable moving forward to the next item?
Mhm.
Okay. Which is related to me and my being our district's representative on the intermediate 287 board. The reason why this is a separate item from the other assignments that we're gonna get to briefly is because my term expired at the end of December. And so the intermediate district 287 has asked for each district to affirm who their board representative is going to be for the next 2-year cycle. Is there anything else?
So yes, I'm recommending as a superintendent, just as a reminder, board member Brackey took this over 2 years ago, has been doing an exceptional job of representing us. This is a twice monthly meeting plus a large amount of 287 events that Ms. Brackey enthusiastically participates in. And so she has indicated in my conversation a willingness to continue on this obligation. And so my suggestion to the board would be to allow Ms. Brackey to continue her strong representation of our district and our interest in that collaboration with 287. But it does take the formal vote of the board.
Well, I am very grateful to Crystal for serving in this role. I think she does a fabulous job. I will second that observation and would be happy to move that she continue in the role as she has done it so well.
I will add that she also is really strong at sharing those events that other people might want to attend. So I always really appreciate letting me know when those are coming up, and they're usually really interesting. So with that said, I would second the motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Malik. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I will also vote aye and am reappointed to the District 287 Board as our representative. So the next two items are also around how we as board members engage with both internal and external groups. So this is an initial conversation for this evening in terms of people just starting to share some of their thoughts and preferences for 2020. And then we will take formal action to approve these assignments at a coming meeting, whether it's our next meeting or the first one in February. None of these other ones are quite as time sensitive. So first up are the school liaison assignments. The 2019 assignments are listed in the board packet. And so this is an opportunity for anybody to share if they are thinking about a change. Obviously, we have John, who was serving as the centennial assignments. We do not need to assume that Allegra will just slide in there. If people want to consider some broader changes, that's great too.
I'd like to move to Centennial and continue with RDLS either by myself or in company partnership with one of you. Either way. Since I live right
across the street, essentially.
Not even over the fence.
Yeah. I'm happy to stick with the RDLS and RCEP pairing. If there are any who are interested in a change, then I would be certainly willing to step up for another spot if somebody wants to make a change.
I like all of them, so it doesn't matter.
Nice.
This is a win-win situation for all of us.
Allegra?
I would be interested in our STEM, also interested in RDLS or RCEP, so if that plays into your equation at all. But I would be honored to be the liaison for our STEM.
So that half of the table is taking all of them.
So what I heard so
Are you gonna
collaboratively
replay?
was I
Okay.
heard new board member Smishek offering to take our STEM while Ms. Cole offered to take Centennial. And then people can be seconded on any list that they feel like, but then everyone has a school and every school is represented.
I think that sounds like a great
sounds great.
synthesis.
So that is what the notes will reflect. If anybody wants to be an and on any school, certainly you can be it officially or unofficially at any time.
We will let that come to us in written form, and any further thoughts, of course, are welcome. Let's turn to the board liaison assignments, and again, we have the document that shows what the 2019 appointments were, and then a new copy that reflects the fact that we could have a whole host of changes for 2020. So just because one of us who is still on the board was in a role in 2019 does not mean that we have to be for 2020. So this really is the opportunity to think broadly about the different groups that we work with and the different interests that we all hold. And so tonight is just an opportunity for people to voice some of those interests. And then again, this will be an iterative process from here.
I would say that Crystal, with your with 287 and the many things that you have, and also being chair, you might want to just consider one you might like to
Thank you.
To let go of.
I appreciate that, and I will do that.
And I think, Christine, with the new duties you will do as clerk, you should might also wanna.
Well, I was actually thinking, I've been on FPAC since years before I was on the board.
Wow.
It's a wonderful committee. I have learned so much being on that committee, but I think it's also a good opportunity for either a new board member or the treasurer, if she was interested, because it aligns well with those duties, but also, I feel like as a new board member, if you don't have a lot of that, background about school finance and how things, at least how it's run by ours. It's a good committee, really nice people, and it's very educational. And I think another really big benefit is you get to hear things a couple times, because a lot of times they hear things and then it gets brought to a board meeting, so it really helps kind of cement everything.
When my first 2 years, I believe I joined that committee for that reason, because I felt that the finance and the budgeting and the bigger issues were discussed there, and I found it really helpful. I had to drop out because the child swap at 7 p.m. got really difficult. But I think that if Allegra would like to do it, and then if I can, be on call, which is what I do with Christine sometimes, or when she's not able to go, then, I go. So something to think about.
I was going to ask a question about a couple of things that are not on this list, and just wondering if not that any of us need to necessarily pick a liaison, but we do have athletic extracurricular advisory, but at the same time, I know that the Richfield Public Schools Foundation and the, if you want to call it, umbrella booster organization, there's work that's being done around both in how that aligns with athletic extracurricular advisory, et cetera. It seems like this is a little bit of a work in progress, but I don't know I don't know, we've had formal, I think a number of you, not me, I know Christine, you've done athletic extracurricular advisory to some extent, and others maybe, but I just think we need to have that on our radar, especially with RPS Foundation, as that is an organization that, as a 501c3, they will have to have their own voting board, but having an ex officio.
Is that
board
springing to
member.
life?
Correct,
Yeah,
it is.
It is.
So an ex officio, to have an ex officio board member liaising was a traditional thing with RPS Foundation. The second question I have is the Richfield Health Resource Center. And I don't know, I think if I recall correctly, at one point in time, at early in the inception of the Health Resource Center, there was a committee. I don't know where things stand at this point as far as how that relationship is sort of governed and overseen, but I'm just curious.
Is that separate from the Health, Safety, and Wellness Committee? It is. I've seen that.
There is
Microphone,
an
please.
advisory.
Yeah.
Sorry. Again, there is an advisory committee that meets, I believe, monthly. That's made up of members from Park Nicollet and the school.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
a couple others, but I can find out if they.
Yeah, I would be interested in both health, safety, and wellness and the Health Resource Center.
Okay. And have we? I just don't know if we typically had board members on that, so I'll just make sure that.
No, the answer would be no.
Okay, perfect.
So,
I will
because
take
no
care
board
of that.
member, to my knowledge, has had any participation to this date.
So one of the things we try to do is update with new board meeting or new meetings of the committees, and so we will continue to do that. I do notice activities advisory is on here, but we don't have the umbrella fundraising advisory group on there. We don't have the dates for the new RPS Foundation. Good point, we don't have the Park Nicollet group. The other thing to keep in mind is that just because they are liaison assignments, that doesn't mean that they are all represented by board members. And so if there isn't a board member with an interest, or if there is a liaison assignment that is valued but doesn't have board level representation, admin, obviously there are places like Metro ECSU where we as admin go. And if there are things to bring back, we are then responsible for making sure that that gets shared effectively with the board. And so that can also happen if there are areas that have typically liaised or are possibilities for the future that admin can support us.
And I think it's worth saying too that whomever is the liaison, whether it's a staff member or a board member, if it's not fair to expect that somebody's able to make every meeting, that's okay. I think we should all just be clear about what our expected level of attendance or commitment is going to be, so whomever that group is knows what to expect of us. So I just felt that would be a good time to say that too.
Well, I know, and sometimes if there's something, if you can't make one and you know there's something important, like I've called on other people to see where I felt like one of us should be there and I wasn't able to be, and I've never had a problem finding someone, or else I would reconnect with whoever leads that meeting afterwards and find out kind of.
And there's things like the city council that a lot of happen because like a liaison, there's a lot of things that I talk to the mayor about, or specific council members, things in agendas or things that they're concerned about us. So a lot of work also happens behind the scenes, not necessarily at the meeting, but really that feedback about legislation or changes or things related to schools and or partnerships, like we have been doing in the past couple of years.
And then one tangential thing is that also some of the dates sometimes change. And so, for example, on here the Superintendent Strategic Advisory is on the 15th, but we decided as a group at our last meeting to move that to the 14th along with the large group strategic planning process. And I think also the Safe and Supportive Schools have moved their meeting to that same time, and I believe District Curriculum Advisory might also. Yep, I'm getting the nod. They also chose to move their meeting to that same time. So we also sometimes collapse some of those dates even though they're here.
One more micro thing and then one bigger picture thing. The Safe and Supportive Schools Advisory Committee is actually two separate committees. There's the one that meets during the school day with students, and then there's the one that meets in the evening with community members and staff. And so I think just wanting to make sure that people know there's two different ones, and I think that is one where we can have multiple board members involved because it's, I think, such an important and really fun group to be a part of. And then the second thing I was going to say is just, given where we are in this, maybe it would make sense to filter just initial thoughts and hopes for these assignments to Mary and or Steve. Feel free to include me if you would like to, and then we can start working on how to actually put all of this together, because I don't think that is something that we can probably productively do at the table.
And if it takes us a couple meetings, it'll take us a couple meetings.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just quick add, I have heard at the district committee meetings that I've been at that we are starting to include or looking for student liaisons also to these committees. So I don't know, it'd be nice for us to kind of all be looking for potential students to join those, but if you are on one and it hasn't been brought up, maybe one of us could bring it up, because it's been at the last few I've been at. And I think it could be a big benefit.
So the last item is the item related to board member honorarium. We set this amount on an annual basis and always have the opportunity to look at this for both the short term for the immediate year, but also the question of long term, which I know we have discussed in the past. So we could choose to take action for this evening for 2020 and or to request further study, whether it's for the short term or for the long term. So I am eager to hear any board member perspectives that exist on this one.
I brought it up last year, the idea of scheduling an increase My belief is that no one sitting here is interested in giving themselves a raise in the near term or in immediate action. And so if we were to be thoughtful, we would find some time in the future, probably beyond all of our next elections, so that theoretically we could be thrown out before we
Personally benefited.
correct, before we personally benefited or walk away on schedule. And so, again, it's not that the amount is enough or inadequate, or it's not inadequate, but it's also there is a lot of time that people in the community put in if they were to serve in this role, and we don't want that to be a barrier to their participation or their interest in the role. If someone had childcare issues or other things, or had to miss work in order to be here, we would want to make sure, or the prep time, or the 3 pages of liaison assignments we just covered, we would want to make sure that they were left as close to whole as possible, so that they could say, well, I can afford to do it, and so that it's not just a luxury item. So anyway, I'm not proposing that we do that now, but that's, we have time, since the earliest I would propose it would be January 2024.
So and I think the board had asked us to take a look from an HR perspective at what compensation of other boards are. As you note, the Board of Education of Richfield Public Schools has had the same amount since 2006. There actually had been very little motion around the Metro in regard to honorariums for boards for a very long time. There has been some small steps in the recent future, or recent past, of some of the area districts. We are in that median range at this point, but there is evidence that this is something that we should monitor over the long haul, to just make sure that this does, sort of as Mr. Paulus says, doesn't become something where we are out of the norm, whereas at current present we do seem to still be within that range, but something to definitely monitor.
With that, I would move that we set the honorarium at $500 per month, with an additional $300 per year for the clerk and $600 per year for the chair.
Second the motion.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Mr. Tenzing. Any further discussion, especially as it specifically relates to 2020, which this motion is related to? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the honorarium for board members is approved. Finally, we have donations to the district that have been made in recent weeks.
All right, and so we have another set of wonderful donations to Richfield Public Schools and to our Sunshine Fund. And so the Sunshine Fund received a donation of $2,000 from the Richfield Lions Club. Sunshine Fund received donations of $1,185 additional dollars through Give to the Max Day from the following people. Michelle and Greg Larson, $75 in honor of Lowell and Gwen Larson. Lauren Betcherer, $100. Angela Lean, $25. Mike Luffholm, $25. Cormark Meadows, $500. Ross Murray, $25. Brian Kirchman, $100. Michelle Burnside, $25. Lisa Ferreira, $10. Sarah Sullivan, $50. Tammy Draheim, $25. TJ Plaza, $25. And Anonymous, $200. So we are again very thankful to the community for supporting the sunshine needs of our students.
I will move that we accept these donations with gratitude.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Mishak. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the donations are accepted with gratitude. We move into the advanced planning section of the agenda, starting with a legislative update.
All right, and so just as a quick reminder, we begin 2 weeks from Tuesday with our legislative study session. And so we'll be in here meeting with our local legislators, and we'll be talking about our legislative platform and our priorities, and we will also be asking them for their priorities. So just as a reminder, and then I'll be sharing out just to refresh us on the legislative platform and the conversation that we'll be having with them. So it'll be an exciting and fun opportunity for us to have to talk to our elected officials.
One point that I wanted to make, if I can find the date, is that the Ams D Legislative Preview will occur in February. And I am not finding the date right now. But at any rate, I would encourage anyone who is interested to set aside some time. It is typically starting at around 7:30 or so, going till about 10 a.m. is what the time I have set aside.
Yeah, Friday, February 7th, starting at
February
7 a.m.
7th, yeah. So think about now putting that on your calendar. And that is an opportunity to hear typically from a panel that would consist of the chairs and ranking members of the House and Senate K-12 Education Policy and Finance Committees. And frequently some of our local legislators would be in attendance as well. So I would love to have company.
Great, thank you. So we will move into any additional information or questions members of the board would like to share with each other. The only thing on my list was just to ensure that people on the board and people watching in the community more broadly have our first strategic planning session in their minds. It is, as the superintendent just mentioned, January 14th in the, why don't you share the
high
details?
school cafeteria starting at 5:30, and we will have a community meal for anybody who would like to join us for that, with the meeting starting, I believe, at 6:15.
With translation?
With translation, yep, in multiple languages, and handouts, childcare, and lots of fun.
Great. Anything else?
I would just share that I will not be able to be at the next meeting.
Okay.
Just so you are aware of what
So that next meeting will be Tuesday, January 21st, as we've shared, because of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday the 20th. We've got the study session at 6, our regular meeting at 7, which will begin with public comment, and also presentations from our American Indian Education Program and the Beacons program. So lots of good stuff to cover there.
Correct. We may also have, it's either that one, I got word today, they may be ready for the student presentation of their recommendations for school district improvements. So that will either be at that or the first meeting in February. But I got a tentative RSVP today from Mr. Harris.
I don't want to push that any later, and I'm concerned, especially with the study session at 6, how many things that could lead to on the agenda for that evening. So we should just
we'll have that conversation.
Balance that out. Yep. Okay. Finally, any items that board members would like to request for upcoming agendas that have not already been named? Seeing none, the final item of business on the agenda is to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Paulus, a second by Ms. Cole. Any discussion? Just say happy first meeting. We're excited that you're with us. To Allegra, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the meeting is adjourned at 9:14 p.m.